Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Mature Masculine Podcast. First, I'm excited to share with you that next week I'm going to have my first guest on this podcast, and we're going to be talking about the sensitive hearts of men. I'm going to be talking with Andrew from Infinite Devotion. So I'm super excited about that, and you can look forward to seeing that podcast episode come out here in the near future. Today, I want to talk about the relationship between money and power because this is something I've been thinking a lot about. I recently joined the Uncivilized Nation, which is Trevor Boehm's, basically his men's organization. And the theme for the first month was all about money. And it was interesting because I just left my job and I decided I wasn't going to go to graduate school. And so, like, in a very real sense, on the one hand, I'd left the job, which had a secure source of income coming in. And on the other hand, I also chose not to go to graduate school, which was a source which was going to take out a lot more money. And I began to reflect really on my relationship with money and power. And what's interesting is this is going to lead us to another conversation that I'm going to share with you, even for where we're going to go even further than this. But for today, we're going to focus just on money and power. So a lot of times when people think about money, they treat money as a positive or a negative force. And I don't agree with that. Money is neutral. It's what you do with money that matters, and it's your mentality, your approach. Do you have a scarcity mentality? Do you have an abundance mentality? I've had a scarcity mentality a lot of the time with money, and part of that was because growing up, I grew up under circumstances where my parents didn't have necessarily a lot of money. My dad did, but then he also had child support payments to other people and stuff like that. So he had some money and yet he didn't. And then my mom, was doing what she could was a single parent doing what she could to get by, and of course having to raise two kids. So, I learned early on that, like, with money, that it was hard to get, that it required a lot of work, and that generally it was easy to spend, and that you should really save. I learned some good money management skills. If you don't have a lot of money, that's what I learned. I learned how to manage that money effectively. I can live really I can live on a really tight income and get by okay. But I didn't learn how to invite money into my life. And what I came with eventually, I changed some of that programming. I started learning how to invite some money into my life. And I think as men, this is really important, because we there like in every area of our lives there is a need to take responsibility. So one of the reasons I'm creating this video is because I want you to think about, like, your own life. Like, how are you taking responsibility for your finances? How are you taking responsibility for your money? How are you taking responsibility for your relationship with money and for what money represents? And we're going to get into what money represents here in a little bit. But for example, are you keeping track of your finances each week? Are you tracking how much you're spending versus what's coming in? Are you looking at what you're investing versus what you're holding on to just in case? When you think about money, do you get anxious? Do you get afraid? Do you worry? Or are you happy and content? There's no right or wrong answer here, and the fact of the matter is that there's probably going to be times where you feel all of the above. Do you have a budget? Do you understand, like, what your money is going toward, and what it should be going toward? These are good questions to ask. Now, when I left my job, I knew that my relationship with money was going to have to change a bit. I was no longer bringing in a steady paycheck. I have some sources of income coming in, and I'm working very hard right now to get some more sources of income in. But I had to really look at that and think about it. And one of the things that I immediately decided to cut out was eating out. Like, I don't really need to eat out, and it actually costs me more to eat out than it costs me to just go to the grocery store, buy the food, and make it. And I'm eating healthier, so why not? This became a really relevant point of understanding in regards to myself around what I was doing and how I was choosing to do it. So, when I look at money and I look at it, I kind of look at it like, what is my relationship with money? Because money likes to move. And so one of the things that I found, for example, is that I can invest money. That's great. And I do want to invest it in ways that ideally grows that money. Um, but I also want to look at how like my relationship with money transforms. And one of the realizations that I have had over the years, but I think it was brought into more clarity by the recent challenge or focus on money in Uncivilized Nation, is that money is an essential part of how we live our lives. And so when I look at it and think of it in that way, I'm like, oh, what's my relationship with money? Well, my relationship with money is, necessarily needs to change. And that's one of the things that I've done is I've invited it to change. I've invited it to move into my life, and I've invited it in as a form of power, because money is power. And one of the things that I came to realize is that when I have not spent my money well, it's usually because I'm also not holding on to my inner sovereignty well. I'm not connecting in with my inner sovereign. And instead, what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing someone else and what they want and need. Perfect case in point would be most recent relationship, where one of the conditions that the person put on moving into my place was that I get a hot tub, because she didn't want to have to just use the shower. Now, at the time, I mean, she framed it as a romantic quest, but really it was a manipulative tactic on her part. And at the time, when I looked at it, I didn't really see it for what it was. But what I ended up doing is I ended up giving away some of my power through that money and getting that hot tub. I mean, I wasn't particularly attached to having a hot tub. I didn't particularly care one way or another. And yet she was making it a condition for her moving in. She was using it as a way to test to see, like, how far would I go to be with her. And it told her a lot. It told her how much power that she could have over me and over my life, because I pedestaled her over myself. I didn't value my inner sovereign. I didn't say, well, wait a minute, let's hold on here. If we're going to do that, we need to do this together. And this needs to be something that we're really going to commit to. No, it was me buying the hot tub. I share that because it's a good example of what happens when you let someone else have more control or power over your life. And so look at, like, when you look at your finances, really look, who is managing the finances? Are you looking at it with your partner? Or is one of you in control? If one of you is in control, like, what is the level of transparency and communication? My preferred approach with finances is to be completely transparent, and for both people to look at the finances together and to understand what is going where, and get a clear picture of what's happening financially. And that's one area where I did retain my power or my sense of sovereignty, is because I insisted on that. And I kind of shudder to think what would have happened if I hadn't. But when I think about, like, this most recent relationship, I see where I gave away my own sense of power. I paid for all the dates. I would pay for the trips. I would pay for the food and all this other stuff. And what was she really contributing? It was interesting because after the relationship, when I thought about it, I was like, we had good times, but who was creating those good times? It was me. I mean, she was just showing up and along for the ride, but she wasn't actively participating. And it became a really good point of awareness for me around how a man can be manipulated to spend money. And why it's really important to be in touch with our inner sovereign and to really examine our relationship with money. You know, what is the relationship between money and power? Well, money is a form of power. Money as a physical manifestation it's a survival ticket, as William S. Burroughs would put it, but it's more than just that. It is also a form of power. It is a form of opportunity. If I have money, I have the opportunity to transform that money into experiences. So for example, I went to a recent event. I paid money to go to that event. I transformed that money into that experience of that event. And if we look at it even further, money is also a transformation of your life force. Because generally, you are exerting your life force in order to get money. When I was working at my job, I was spending 8 hours a day on the phone talking to people in order to get a certain amount of money per hour that then would be paid to me every 2 weeks. There were other things that were provided as well. Health benefits, PTO, things like that. And all of that stuff was a transformation of life force in order to get a certain amount of quote unquote power and what I could do with that power. Now, when we look at it from that perspective too, it's really important to understand that a lot of times we're undervaluing our time and our life and our experiences because we're usually exchanging, like 8 hours a day, we're exchanging that for a limited amount of money, a limited amount of power. And it's usually just enough to scrape by. And that is capitalism for you. And whether we want to debate the merits of capitalism or not, the point that I kind of want to raise is that if you are a man who is trying to change your relationship with money, one of the most important things you can do is start changing it by looking at it as not just a piece of paper or a plastic card. Look at what it represents for you. What is it doing for you? What is it providing for you? And what is going away as a result as well? Like, I'm putting in my life force and energy in order to ideally make some money. And then I'm taking that money and transforming it into something that sustains my ability to live and allows me to have experiences or allows me to buy certain things or whatever else. So money is a very powerful medium, and money likes to move. It doesn't like to just be held on to. And this is one of the reasons why money as a primal force is something that moves out of our lives. What we need to do is we need to be sovereigns of our own relationship with money. We need to look into the mystery of the relationship with money. And from our inner sovereigns, we need to really examine, am I showing up in the right place? Am I showing up with this inner sovereign awareness that allows me to understand and fully connect with how I am in relationship with money, and how my relationship with money is also influenced by the relationships of people that I'm in connection with. So as an example, if I'm in relationship with somebody, is that relationship reciprocal? One of the things we can look at is the way that money enters into that picture. And if I'm going and I'm exerting, if I'm putting a lot of money toward that and the other person is not, well, then we have to really examine what else is happening there. And this is why it's really important to examine how we are giving away our sense of power, and really examine, like, if we're not in right relationship with somebody. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't ever treat your romantic partner out on a date, or do something like that. And I'm not even decrying the idea of like having a relationship where quote unquote the man is the provider and the woman gets, does other things. And I mean, like, if that's the kind of relationship dynamic you want to have, then go for it. But what I am saying is, let's bring some conscious awareness to what is actually happening in that relationship and ask yourself, is this what I really want? And here's the moral of the story. I had that hot tub for a year. And then after my ex and I broke up, I sold the hot tub. And I sold it for like $5,000, which was almost all the money that I owed on it, but not quite. So I got some money back for it, but then I still had to continue exerting some quote unquote life force. Now, what I did with that money, the smart thing I did is I took it and I actually, instead of just paying off most of the loan because I had zero interest on the loan, I ended up putting it into a high yield savings account where I would at least get some interest on it that could help to bring out, that would help me basically pay off some of that money, or pay off that loan without having to exert any more of my time and effort. And yet at the same time, what I really look at is how what that hot tub ultimately represented. It represented something for me where it was like, this is a symbol of how I was manipulated and used. This person saw that I had some means and decided to leverage that in order to get something that she wanted. And this is why, as men, we have to really look at this relationship very carefully. Really, as people, period. I mean, because you could be a man or a woman or some other identified gender, whatever you identify as. The question really is, where's the money going? Who's spending it? Who's earning it? And what does this represent about the power relationship that you have? Because the way that you handle money and the way that money is spent, whether it's just in regards to yourself or it's in regards to being with somebody else, speaks directly to the power dynamic that is at work in that relationship. So you need to have a good relationship with money, and you also need to look at how that relationship with money is affected by other people and have set good boundaries. And if you're a man who doesn't have a good relationship with money, but you want to have a better one, and you also want to see how that changes your relationship, I would invite you to connect with me. You can comment below, and I will be happy to send you some information about my coaching services, or you can join the Mature Masculinity Brotherhood, where we're going to be exploring themes like this together. Because the one thing that I don't want to ever see for another man, and certainly not something I ever want to allow ever again, is seeing somebody get taken advantage of. And it's really important to recognize that happens a lot of the time. And also, it's important that you're not somebody taking advantage of someone. I mean, I've heard just as many stories of men who are basically living off of the woman that they're with, and that's not cool either. So I want to make it very clear: it's not acceptable. It doesn't matter what gender the person is. It's not cool if one person is putting most of the is basically being used for their money and for whatever else they can provide. It's just not cool. It's not a good thing. And we don't want that. So, make that, it's really important to make that clear. And part of how you do that is by looking at your relationship with money. So I hope you found this video helpful. Check out below. There are a few links. Link to my most recent book, The Quest for Mature Masculinity. Link to the Mature Masculine Brotherhood, where you can join. And a link, of course, to all my other services. And please subscribe. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, like it, share it with other people. All right, thank you, and have a great day.